Thanks, Alice. That's a very kind introduction. Getting 3 blues sounds a little bit large. The bottom line was I got hit on the head a lot, so I've forgotten most of what I was taught. Just a few things that I do know. So our theme today is relevance, and how is Jesus relevant? When you look around at our culture, we're fiercely concerned with relevance, aren't we? We've lots of ways of measuring it. So we think of the top 10 tweets of 2012. We can measure the videos that go viral, who is trending. We evaluate celebrities according to their relevance to our lives. We've got A-list celebrities all the way down to D or E-list celebrities. And, as a culture, we seem to be very concerned with how relevant we are, how popular we are. But there's a paradox with relevance. I wonder if you've noticed this, that often there's a sense in which those things or those people that try hardest to be relevant are in some ways often pretty insignificant. So think of the top 2 tweets of 2012. Number 1 was very relevant, you'd probably agree. 4 more years, the most by Barack Obama and by all his followers. That's relevant. The second one was Justin Bieber. Now, if you're one of the people in this room who doesn't know who Justin Bieber is, give thanks to the Lord that he's mercifully spared you. Then think of the top 10 viral videos. Number 1, Fenton. You've seen the video, come on, haven't you? Fenton the dog pursuing the deer across Richmond Park. Or number 2, Charlie. Charlie, the finger, remember? With the brother biting his finger. If you haven't seen that, then waste 30 seconds and go and see it. Now, these viral videos, they're fun, aren't they? They're trending, they're hugely kind of popular. But when you ask the question, how relevant are they to my life? Well, in some sense, they're just here today and gone tomorrow. They don't change your life at all. They couldn't be more irrelevant. They're just a bit of mild titillation while you should be revising or writing an essay or doing your labs or whatever else it is, right? And that's sometimes the way, isn't it? Today, politicians spend a lot of their time courting our attention, trying to be relevant, and if they're not careful, there can be a sense in which it becomes, well, a little bit needy, maybe, a little bit sycophantic. See, the most relevant things are often those which initially come across as quite unpopular. So think of, let's go back, to the 15th century, Copernicus. It's difficult to think of a more relevant discovery to, kind of modern science than the fact that the solar system is not centered around the Earth, but is heliocentric. Now, when Copernicus first discovered that, it was hugely unpopular, widely dismissed by popular culture as being an irrelevance. And yet it was a complete paradigm shift. It was a complete game changer. It's difficult to think of something more relevant. Usain Bolt. When he was initially growing up, everyone said too tall to sprint, no good. And yet it's difficult to think of a more relevant sports person because he's completely changed the way we view sprinting. So initially dismissed as irrelevant, now probably the most relevant sprinter of the past 50 or 60 years. Or Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill initially obsessed with Hitler, so obsessed that that was a contributing factor to his wilderness years when everybody dismissed him as being an irrelevant politician. And of course, he's become arguably the most relevant politician of the 20th century for UK. Incidentally, you've got to love Winston Churchill. If you ever get a chance, just look at some of the quotes you can get from Winston Churchill. He had this ongoing banterous relationship. Is banterous a word? I've just made it up. There we go. He had this ongoing banter relationship with a woman called Bessie Braddock in the Houses of Parliament. And their interchanges are brilliant. One day, she saw him at the bar in the House of Parliament. She said, "Sir, you're drunk, and what's more, you are disgustingly drunk." He said, "Madam, you are ugly, and what's more, you are disgustingly ugly. But I will be sober in the morning." So that's a good one. It sits with you a bit, that one, doesn't it? And then she replied, "Sir, you're incorrigible. If I were your wife, I would poison your cup of tea in the morning." He said, "Madam, were you my wife, I would drink that tea gladly." So here's the thing with relevance. If you try too hard to be relevant, then you can often end up being irrelevant. And similarly, if you just dismiss the things that seem initially unpopular, then you miss the really relevant thing. Because often the things that change paradigms, the things that are game changers, are precisely those things that because they're game changers, we find it difficult. We resist them. And so this is how it connects with Christianity. Very often today, Christianity is dismissed as being an irrelevance because it says what we're often a bit uncomfortable about. We have certain well-formed views, a worldview if you like, and Jesus and Christianity does not fully fit the paradigm. And so we say, well, it's an irrelevance because it doesn't fit with popular culture, or it doesn't fit with my ideals, or with my worldview. But you see, if we make that mistake, it could be that Christianity and Jesus Christ is the most relevant thing. It could be that he's a complete game changer. But you're dismissing him maybe. Well, you're not because you're here and you're looking into it. But someone's dismissing him because he's just different. And to do that is to make a big mistake. I actually want to take our time this afternoon, just looking at a passage in John's Gospel where there's a guy called Nathanael, and he's introduced to Jesus, and for him, he sees him as an irrelevance to start off with. But actually, as you just look through a few verses of this interaction between Nathanael and Jesus, we see just how very different his view of Jesus becomes once he actually gives him the time of day. And I want to start off just by looking at the challenge of relevance. We've looked at the paradox of relevance, but just the challenge of relevance. Let me just read the first kind of interaction between Jesus and Nathanael. So, the next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee, and he found a man called Philip. He said to him, "Follow me." Now, Philip, like Andrew and Peter, these are two other disciples, were from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael. Philip and Nathanael are friends. And Philip said to him, now this is quite a claim, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." "Nazareth," said Nathanael, "can anything good come from there?" Right, let's try to put the claim that Philip makes to Nathanael in modern-day understanding. Nathanael has come across Philip, and Philip comes up to him and he says, "So you know the Bible, you know the Old Testament, the Scriptures. You know that there's one figure that's kind of prophesied who emerges from those Scriptures as being the central figure of the Scriptures, long awaited for by our people, the Jews. He's known as the Messiah, which means the Anointed One. He's prophesied for hundreds of years. We've been waiting for him for 400 years. You know that guy? Well, he's living around the corner in just around the corner in Galilee." Now that's quite a claim, isn't it? In fact, he says he's been there for 30 years, but you've just never known about him. Think about it. If your friend came up to you and said that, you would be thinking, "Oh dear, Philip, drinking, have we?" It's just an odd claim, isn't it? But what's interesting, notice with Nathanael that he says, "Nazareth, can anything good come from there?" So he says, there's no chance. But he goes and sees. Now this is crucial. This is the challenge of the relevant. You see, there's two ways we can be fools. You can be a fool if you're gullible. To be gullible just means to accept something in an unquestioning way without any evidence to back it up. That is foolishness. And please don't ever hear any Christian preacher or talk or speaker saying that you need to be gullible. Don't be gullible. Please don't leave your brain at the door. You won't understand Jesus Christ if you leave your brain at the door. Come with your questions. So don't be gullible. But there's another error, and that's to be dismissive. You know, you hear the challenge and you say, "Well, I can't believe that." You're not prepared to investigate it, you're just dismissive. And remember back, if you had been the coach and you just dismissed Usain Bolt, well, you'd be a fool, wouldn't you? Actually, I have a good friend of mine who lives in Australia. His mother and father lived for a while on the same street that Bill Gates grew up on. And Bill Gates came to them one day, this is true, offering them to invest in what he called the personal computer. And they dismissed it as an irrelevance. You see, if you just dismiss something, if you're dismissive without looking into it, well, then you might miss the fiercely relevant. But Nathanael's not like that, because he says, "Nazareth, can anything good come from there?" But then he goes. He says, "I've got questions, but I'm going to go." And maybe that's you today. Maybe you're saying, "Look, I've got loads of questions about Christianity. Jesus Christ, he doesn't fit my paradigm. He seems to be very different. He seems to be unpopular with the culture, and I've got lots of questions." But can I just say thank you for coming? Fair play to you. You've come along. And as you come along, the way you're going to be able to engage is come with your questions, but be open. Let me call it open skepticism. I think this is the mindset you need to have. Have your questions, but be open to them being challenged. Don't be dismissive. Come with your questions. Think about them, because if it's true, if it's real, if it stacks up in space, time, and history, it will stand up to scrutiny, right? So open skepticism, that's Nathanael, he comes along. But then it's interesting, it moves from just the challenge of the relevant to an encounter with the relevant. So Nathanael goes along. "Come and see," said Philip. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said to him, "Here is a true Israelite, in whom there is nothing false." "How do you know me?" Nathanael asked. Jesus answered, "I saw you while you were still under the fig tree, before Philip called you." Then Nathanael declared, "Rabbi," which means teacher, "you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." So it moves from a challenge, here to an encounter. Now, what's going on? Jesus says a strange thing to Nathanael as he sees him coming towards him. He says, "Behold, here is an Israelite in whom there is nothing false." Now, that's a reference to a psalm which Nathanael would have definitely known growing up in a Jewish religious culture. It's a very famous psalm, Psalm 32. And in that psalm, it talks of a person. It talks of the type of person that God will forgive. It says the type of person that God gives his mercy to is a person not who's perfect, because they wouldn't need mercy, but a person who knows they've got faults, but in whom there is no deceit. The modern day kind of psychological term for it would be authenticity. It means, if you came to Rico's talk last night, he was talking about how we all have rats in the basement. We all have things that we're ashamed about, which is why you would never be happy for your mum to see your browser history. So we've all got these things we're not too comfortable about. And actually Jesus says, Nathanael, you know there's things you're not comfortable with. You know there's things that you're ashamed of. But here's the thing. You're not trying to bluff it out. Come on, let's be honest. At Oxford, the main educational thing we get from Oxford is we become great blaggers, isn't it? I mean, isn't the whole tutorial system set up for you? You come in hopelessly prepared. You're under a lot of pressure. What do? Strong suit, blag, 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 blag. Isn't that what you do, or is that just me? I mean, I think it was just me, but there we go. If you're not like that, then fair play, you'll probably get a first. If you are like that, 2-1, 2-2, third, that's where you're going, so it's fine. But that's okay. The rest of the world, they don't know that, so you can blag it out for the rest of your life. It's okay. They're impressed by the Oxford tab. That's the way it works. But here's the thing. We become very good at blagging, but Nathanael's not like that. He's got authenticity. Nathanael says, I've got my faults, and I want to do something about it. That's what Jesus diagnoses. He says, you're that type of person, Nathanael, aren't you? You're a Psalm 32 type guy. And Nathanael gets the reference. So he turns around to Jesus and says, do you know me? Or kind of, how do you think you know me? Maybe he's pushing him back. Maybe he really is starting to get the sense that Jesus does know him, is showing some kind of insight. And then Jesus says something which poleaxes him. He says, I just saw you under the fig tree. Now, at this moment, if you read theology, commentators go nuts. They have no idea what happened under the fig tree. The conjecture comes out. What was he doing under the fig tree? Who else was with him under the fig tree? Were there any animals involved with the fig tree? No one knows. No one knows. And this is the point. No one has a clue about the fig tree except for two people. Nathanael knows about the fig tree. He was there. Jesus knows about the fig tree. He saw him there. Not physically saw him, but he had some supernatural insight. And at that moment, Nathanael makes the most amazing exclamation. He says, Rabbi, teacher, you are the Son of God. In a few verses, he's gone from saying to his friend Philip, you've got to be kidding me. The anointed one, the king, the long-awaited Messiah around the corner in Nazareth, to saying, you are the Son of God. You are the anointed one. What changed? Well, he's had an encounter with Jesus. There's nothing more relevant than when you actually meet someone face to face. It's sometimes maybe your friends have talked to you about a girl or a guy, and they say, well, you really got to meet them, and they give you the kind of list of their achievements or something. They put their best foot forward, and then that's one thing, but it's very different when you meet someone, isn't it, face to face, and that's what's happening here. And let me just say, the reason I'm turning to the Bible now, let me just deconstruct it for you. I'm turning to the Bible because the belief is, in fact, the conviction of Christianity has been for the last 2,000 years and more, that as we open up the words of the Bible, they're not just human beings writing words down. They're the words of God speaking personally to us today. And so as we open up God's word, and as I explain it to you, God is addressing you directly. That sounds like an odd thing to say. I know that. But odder still is when you actually get a sense that it's happening. 13 years ago, I was sitting in a hall like this, actually in St. Ebbe's, and someone was giving a talk on Christianity. They were preaching from the Bible. And as I was sitting there, the oddest thing happened. It was like what had become abstract became very personal. What had been so irrelevant for a long time, but mildly interesting, became fiercely relevant. I actually got a sense that God was speaking to me personally. Just as Nathanael, when he met Jesus, got a sense that this really is the Messiah. C.S. Lewis puts this brilliantly in a quote, and he's far more articulate than I am, and obviously he would have done a lot better at PPE than I did, so I'm going to read a quote from him that explains this. It is always shocking, he writes, to meet life where we thought we were alone. Look out, we cry, it's alive, and therefore this is the point at which so many draw back. I would have done so myself if I could and proceed no further with Christianity. An impersonal God, well, that's fine. A subjective God of beauty, truth, and goodness inside our own heads, better still. But God himself, alive, pulling at the other end of the cord, perhaps approaching us at a speed, the hunter, the king, the husband, that's another matter. There comes a moment when the children who've been playing at burglars suddenly hush. Did we hear a real footstep in the hall? There comes a moment when people who have been dabbling in religion as man's search for God suddenly draw back. Supposing we actually found God. We never thought it would come to that. Worse still, supposing that he found us. In a crowd this size, it may well be, and it might have been over the course of this week, that as you've been listening to the talks, you've had a sense of God pressing in, a sense that he's speaking to you personally. If I can put it like this, that he's seen your fig tree moment. He knows you there. He saw you there. Maybe you're getting it now. The thing is that is an encounter with God through his word, and is the most relevant thing that can happen. Don't dismiss it. But just as I close, it's very interesting how it goes on. Because you'd think Jesus would say, great, you've got my identity, fantastic, job done, great, you're one of the disciples. But look at what he says. He turns around to Nathanael, he said, you believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree, you're going to see greater things than that. And he then added, I tell you the truth, you shall see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. Finally, this is a uniquely relevant claim. Effectively, Jesus says something to him like this. He says, fine, you believe in me because I was able to talk about the fig tree thing, and you've had an experience, but an experience alone is not enough. See, here's the thing, and then we're stepping back into the talk. Mysticism is an experience without truth. It says there's no such thing as truth, it's all about what you experience. Modernism is truth with no experience. I learned that from PP. There you go, that's all I've got for you. Mysticism, an experience without truth. Modernism, truth but no experience. Christianity, truth and experience. And see, Nathanael has just had an experience, but Jesus says if it's not grounded in truth, if it's not an experience of truth, then it would be too easy to manipulate you, Nathanael. It could just be a cheap parlor trick. But he says it's not a cheap parlor trick, because this is the crucial claim. And by the way, this is a whopper of a claim as I close on it. He refers to an incident in the Old Testament, an incident that's popularly known as Jacob's ladder, where Jacob, one of the patriarchs, the forefathers of the Jewish faith, has a vision and sees the angels, the messengers of God, ascending and descending between heaven and earth. And it's symbolic of God connecting with earth, God and man being in connection. It's like a nexus, a connection point, God and humanity. And what's interesting is Jesus takes it and he tweaks it. Let me read it, see if you can spot it. He says, I tell you the truth, you shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. See the last bit? On the Son of Man. Jesus' favorite term for himself. He says, if you like, that vision was just a forerunner. I'm what it's all about. He says that if you want to know where heaven opens up, where God and humanity connect, where you can understand the truth about God, how you can understand what God thinks of you, where you can understand the purpose for your life and how God wants to connect with you, if you want to understand that, look at the Son of Man, look at me. He's making a whopping claim. He's saying, I am the unique connection point between heaven and earth, between God and humanity. It's me. Now that is quite a claim. But here's the thing about the claim. It's such a whopper, it's easy to knock down. If it's not true, you can dismiss it. But if it is true, well, it's the most relevant thing, I put it to you, that you could ever hear. See, right now, you're kind of thinking with all your postmodern mindset, well, he's just gone to the power play, unique claim of truth, and feel a bit awkward about that. But pause for a moment. Don't be dismissive. Be careful. Be skeptical. That's fine. But be open. Be skeptical, but be open. Think about it. If this is true, this is the game changer. And friends, can I say, this is the fundamental standing point of Christianity. Jesus claims uniquely to be the way, the truth, and the life. He claims to be the way, that is the way that God is going to connect to humanity through Jesus' life, his death, and his resurrection. He claims to be the truth revealed about who God is and who we are and what the nature of our world is. and he claims to be the life. God's life breaking into our world by Jesus Christ through his Spirit. The way, the truth, and the life. And he says to Nathanael, don't just believe because of an experience, believe because you've had an experience of the truth. And that's the claim. And I put it to you that it's the most uniquely relevant claim that there could be. Fine if it's wrong to dismiss it, but here's the thing. The Christian claim is that it's difficult to dismiss because Jesus proved it in space, time, and history. He wrote it large with blood across 2,000 years of history. It's a matter of historical record, his life, his death, and resurrection. You can investigate it. That's why I want you to engage your brains as you come together. That's why we put these week of events on. And that's why we have a follow-up course where you can come and ask your questions and debate it. It may well be that you've got loads of questions and you're not persuaded. Thanks so much for coming on and listening carefully. But do investigate it. Careful of gullibility, careful of dismissiveness. But open skepticism, well, you're just the type of person to look into this. I'm going to close, and because it's the end of the week, it might be appropriate for me to close by saying a prayer. The reason I'm doing that is we can talk to God just by praying. And some of you, this won't be right for everybody, of course, but some of you might want to connect with God, if you like. And because of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, we can do that just by talking and prayer. It almost seems so simple that it seems silly, but it's just the way it works. You can talk to God because he's everywhere, and we can ask him to connect with him. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say a prayer that will do that. I'll ask you to bow your heads in a moment. And then as I do that, if you'd like to connect with God, if you'd like to have a relationship with him, to know him, if you feel the relevance of him to your life, then you can just echo that in your hearts. Say amen, and then it would be appropriate for you to come and see someone afterwards, and Alice will give you ways to follow up. But let's just bow our heads and I'll say a quick prayer. Thanks, Heavenly Father, that through your Son, Jesus, you connect with humanity. And we pray that you would help us to connect with you now, through his life, through his death, and through his resurrection. Please help us to have a relationship with him for his sake. Amen. Thanks for listening. Alice, back to you.
Well, I hope all of you had the opportunity to text in your questions. If not, carry on. But we're going to start the question and answer session now. So if we could have our first question up, that would be great. Thank you. Okay. Surely this stuff is only relevant to me if I accept it's true. Over to you, Pete.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's exactly what I'm saying is that, and I think that's exact. Can you hear me? I'm not on, am I? Am I on? No, shaking heads.
Go with that for a moment.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what the Bible is saying to you, is that you can only accept it, and therefore if it's true, and it's only relevant if it's true. And Christianity has always stood or fell on the truth of its claim. But within that, let's just be careful about it, because of the truth of it is making a claim that's written in space, time, and history, a matter of historical record. It's not merely saying that it's for you to kind of independently, evidentially kind of assess it, but it's saying that it stacks up to the various criterions of truth, which is it really left its imprint on the world in space, time, and history. It's also saying that it makes philosophical sense and is true as a philosophical system. And it's saying that the scriptures, which is its primary witness, are consistent. So yes, it's making a claim of truth, and its relevance stands or falls on that. Otherwise, it's just an irrelevance, but it's a big claim. But investigate it, look into it for yourself, I would say.
Thank you. Can we have the next question, please? Okay, long one. All right, so I need to get a sense that God is speaking to me personally to become a Christian. I've not felt it, so I guess I shouldn't become a Christian. But how do we know that feelings aren't just made up anyway?
Yeah, I think, again, so remember, mysticism, modernism. So that would be true if that was purely a mystical claim, but Christianity is not purely a mystical claim. It's saying that it's grounded, it's rooted in truth, but that also it's an experience of that truth. Now, of course, feelings can be misleading, and this would be the problem. If Christianity was merely saying, believe it because you have a very powerful religious experience, what happens when you wake up tomorrow and you think, well, I was just in that meeting and it doesn't feel very real to you anymore? Then your faith would just be up and down, wouldn't it? No, it's an experience of the truth. So as you open up and engage your brain and look at the scriptures and read it for yourself and ask those fundamental questions, what does it say? You know, is it historically accurate? What is it making sense of? Does it diagnose and make sense of me? As you do that, that itself is an experience. You are engaged in that. So it's not an appealing to kind of mere feelings. It's saying it's an experience of the truth. Okay, so just to tweak on that, but you might want to follow up with me. But it is saying that it's through the scriptures as these are unpacked. Sometimes it becomes very kind of impacting on you as you're listening to a talk. You might feel it very strongly. Other times it feels very mundane. That doesn't make it less true, right? So it's an experience of the truth, which stops it being mysticism, but also is a kickback to modernism as well.
Great. Okay, go with the next question, please. Thank you. How is modernism truth without experience?
Well, so a big part of the modernism kind of movement was an extent to strip out two things that really Greek thought had, kind of lumped together, which is the kind of effectively emotional experience and then also a sense of rationalism and modernism. So let's go really bluntly. You've got Immanuel Kant, kind of leading with, we can understand morality by our brains and by pure reason. Then you've got Hume saying reason is a slave. So you see the art. The modernist endeavour was just trying to say, really, you can't trust experience. It's too easily manipulated. So actually, just go to truth and just ask the question whether it's truth. But in so doing, it's kind of splitting us as human beings down the middle of that. But we also need experience. Because actually, as I'm talking to you, you're true and you're real. But if I'm just very abstracted from it, I'm not engaging with you. And so Christianity is a relationship. And like all relationships, it needs to be grounded in truth, but also needs to be grounded in experience. So you can get into the finer points of philosophy with me. I only got a 2-1, so you'll probably be able to out-debate me quite quickly. But in terms of Christianity, it's a relationship and therefore has both those elements in it together.
Great. I hope that made sense to whoever asked the question.
Did I blag enough, do you think?
Yeah, it was great. Give me the next question, please. Okay, if we have to be open, surely that means being open to lots of things, not just Christianity.
Great question. Yeah, good question. I think one of the myths is that in order to be open, you need to encompass every possible option, which is a myth. So therefore, to say that you like something on a menu doesn't mean you have to try everything on the menu, right? You just need to try one thing that you find you like. Now, I'm not saying that we've got the world religions are all different menus, but the thing is, Christianity makes a unique claim. It's unique because lots of other religions are saying that they're making claims about God. Jesus Christ comes into the world, I am God. So it's unique. So just as you look at it, its head is tallest above the, in the poppy field for you to look at. And here's the thing, if it's wrong, then fine, move on and look at other ones. But since it makes the biggest whopping claim, I would say start with Christianity, start with it, because it should be the easiest to knock down if it's false. And it doesn't mean that if you find that to be true, that you need to try all the other things just to check that they really are false. Because actually the way that contradiction works, if you find something to be true, then everything that contradicts it is false, right? So you don't need to experience everything. You don't need to try all the other religions like a smorgasbord of religiosity and come back and say, this is the one I like most. Look at Christianity, it makes a unique claim. If it's false, dismiss it, fine. But if it's true, everything that contradicts it, and by the way, I put it to you that all the major religions of the world do contradict it, because the person of Christ, he's claiming to be God, and none of the other religions of the world think that he is God. So everything else that contradicts it is false. Now, I know that's a whopper in a postmodern society, but then it should be the easiest to knock down, right? So start with it. Have a go.
Yeah, the talk yesterday was also on the whether Christianity is exclusive, and those talks will be online shortly. So if you asked that question and you weren't here yesterday, maybe have a look at what Michelle said yesterday lunch, because that also kind of talks about that. Can we have the next question? How would it change my life? I'm quite happy not believing, regardless of whether it's true.
Yeah, well, let me talk to one way that it changes your life now, and let me talk to one way that it changes your life in the future. One way that it changes your life now. I'm just going to go personal here, if you don't mind. I hope you don't think it's indulgent. A big thing for me when I was here at university was I was quite idealistic, but I was aware of my own inner contradictions. I had high ideals, but I failed to live them out in my life. So to give you an example, I was a member of Amnesty International. I would write letters, protesting about prisoners of conscience. But I would go out at night and I would get drunk, start fights, and sleep. Now, one day, a friend to me, he said, "Mate, I just don't get you. You're a contradiction. Because you've got high ideals, but you don't live up to them." Now, what do you make of that? What I'm saying to you is, you may well be like that. You might have high ideals. Are you aware of your own inner contradiction? I refer to the browser history. Why? Because we've got our own inner contradictions. Christianity does at the cross, dying for you in flesh and blood to make it right, such that it's paid for. You don't need to feel guilty about it any longer. He's dealt with the guilt. That's how it makes a difference. The sense of release when that came home to me was just enormous, and day by day, it's the thing that gives me genuine and penetrating joy in my life. So that's how it makes a difference right now. In the future, whether or not you believe it now, one day, when you die, you will stand in front of God. He is God of the universe, He is the perfect judge, and you will need to give an account. And that's why we put this on, not to try to scare you, but just to say this is a reality the Bible reveals. And at that day, whatever lifestyle decisions you've made in the life, you will need to know what you think of that, because God will ask you personally. And so, one for the now and one for the future. When you stand in front of the judge, what will you say? You've got two answers. You can start talking about your own moral efforts, or you can say, I trust in Jesus, and He is the one who makes me right. Rico spoke about that last night. He's going to be speaking more about it tonight, so please come along and listen to that.
Thank you. We'll have maybe another 2 questions, so can we have one now? Thanks. It still seems to me that being a Christian is just for those lacking meaning in their lives.
Mildly patronising, but okay. I just call it. I mean, it slightly is, isn't it? I'm sure you're a nice person when you say that and you don't mean it, but the anonymity of the text message means I can give a rejoinder like that. I've got to be honest. I wasn't, when I was at university, I wasn't lacking meaning in my life. I had various, kind of things going on. I was at Oxford, which my parents were hugely proud about. I was playing sport, and I seemed to be doing all right. I was doing okay. I didn't come to Christianity because I was lacking meaning, just personally. I came to it because it was really annoying, and I couldn't dismiss it. I've got to be honest. I had friends who were lovely, but also slightly annoying. Have you got one of those? I dragged you along today. Don't look at them now. That's awkward. But have they been pestering you? But you notice there's something about them. They're not perfect, but there's some authenticity there, and they drag you along, and eventually you give in, so here you are listening to me babbling on. But here's the thing. I started looking into Christianity because they were sufficiently persistent that I thought, okay, I'm going to disprove it. And I'm just saying to you, don't believe in it because you lack meaning. Believe in it whether it's true or not. But have you looked into it? Have you investigated it? It knocked my socks off when I looked into it. It stood up to historical verifiability. It stood up to philosophical proofs. And just the personal witness of the Scriptures, meeting Jesus through the Scriptures, was quite a revelation to me. And I was dismissive before because I'd not looked into it. So don't believe in it because it gives you meaning, though it does. But believe in it because it's true. And that's an easy claim to knock down. If it's false, then just dismiss it, walk on.
Thank you. Okay, let's have the last question up, please. How do I know it is Jesus and not Allah getting in touch with me?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. Just briefly, because I'm aware of the time. So the Scriptures, this is why we keep coming back to this. I hope you didn't think, and I know this is very clear with Rico when he's doing his evening talks, he's opening up the Bible and he's explaining what it says. It's so unsophisticated, it seems almost, almost noddy. He's just saying, what does the Bible say? And he's explaining it, and then he's applying it to his life and to our lives. And the Bible is not talking about Allah. The Bible is talking about a person who really lived in space, time, and history, Jesus Christ. And therefore it's saying, what do you make of him? So the Scriptures, this is why it's a consistent system. It's the claims about Jesus that comes back to the claims the Bible is making about him, and it stands or falls on the Scriptures. So you need to get these open, have a look, and see what you make of these. And look, if you've never read the Bible, start in the New Testament, start with one of those Luke Uncovered, and what have you got to lose? If your Christian friend's annoying, choose another one, and get them to buy you a free coffee, and then go along and just open it up with someone. But what have you got to lose? Just look into it. I really plead with you, look into it, see what you make of Jesus and his life on the pages of Scripture.
Thanks very much. Thanks for your questions. And